Mom Girl, where we talk all things sports, entertainment, fashion, and adventure. On today's show, we're talking to Jill Demby Guest, an Emmy-nominated writer, producer, and director whose latest film, And Now Love, is out now. Welcome to the show, Jill.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me. What a pleasure.
Thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. Well, I'm so excited to hear about, we're definitely going to talk about your film, the film. I just watched it and it's fantastic. But before we get into that, I wanted to kind of dive into your journey a bit. I want to hear, I know you've done a lot of different things, worn many different hats. So I wondered if you could kind of walk us through how you got involved in the industry, or even what you're doing before the industry, if there was something, and then to where you are now.
Well, I will say it's been a long and winding road. And, as a child, I used to like to write stories. So I was always writing. So it gave me good feelings. And I started to, see films. And I didn't know in my teens that I wanted to be a filmmaker, but I did see a film called Blow Up, which was a kind of avant-garde film at the time in the 60s. And but it mixed up time and place and flashbacks, but it had feeling to it. And I got to, these emotions came through and I thought, oh my God, these are stories that can make you feel. And unconsciously, I think, oh my God, maybe I could do that. Maybe I could make stories that would make you feel something. And when I got to college, I wasn't a film student, but I was studying psychology and Russian and some things. And I took a film 101 class and started seeing these avant-garde French films that also mixed up time and memory and place, and also had incredible guttural, visceral feelings evoked in me. And I thought, okay, I think I want to try this. And so I changed my major to film and was the only woman in my film class to graduate. And I did it. I jumped ship. My parents thought I was insane. They, what do you do with that major, right? And so I did something with it.
You definitely have, huh?
So after, the film school thing, I went to New York. I was going to go to graduate school. I was accepted at the London Film School and USC. And I went back to New York because I'm from New Jersey. I went back to New York to make some money to go to graduate school. And as I am working at Madison Square Garden Productions for the director of productions, who does, all the rock shows and everything else, I became friends with a man who was the lighting designer and tour director for the Rolling Stones. And he loved young people. And, a lot of others just wanted to sell me drugs or something, but he was just lovely. And I said, I need a place to edit my thesis film for school. And he said, I'm friends with the Maisel brothers, and they had just done Give Me Shelter, which was my idol. I mean, they were my idols. So I'm like, what? And he said, why don't I give them a call? They love to help young filmmakers. So he called them and he said, yeah, have her call me. So I called them and they said, yeah, come up, meet everybody and use our editing rooms at night. So it was from that, I ended up leaving my job at Madison Square Gardens. The Maisels actually gave me my first job, and they trained me as an editor. I mean, I was doing some shooting too. I used to do some AC work for Al Maisels and some second camera shooting, but they ended up training me as an editor. And so that's how I got my first start in the business. And the people that I met them are still my very good friends today. So that was part of how it started. I think I was a very lucky person because back then, there was a really nice female population in the documentary community, not so much in the feature film community, but definitely the, filmmaker community in New York was really very pro female. And I had role models who worked at the Maisel brothers, who were directors and editors. And I thought, oh, I can, this is a path.
And how great, I love, like, sometimes we have a lot of guests on here and a lot of the key point is where they just asked for something and they went for it. So it was you, like, then making that call to them and asking to edit there. And then it led to this whole career.
Absolutely. And there's a good story that's involved in this too. If anyone knows the film Grey Gardens, which was, pretty much, it became their famous film. And I remember I was syncing up dailies, which at the time, for any of you who don't know, film and tape were separate. So I was actually handling real film as an editor, and I'd have to sync up the sound and the picture. So Alan David Maisels were going to do a biography of Lee Radziwill, who was, related to the Beals. And one day I remember Al was shooting and his camera went off of Lee Radziwill sitting on a fence. It went off of her onto these women in Grey Gardens, and it never left. And he called me and said, let me know how the footage is. You've got to see this footage. I think this is going to be our film. And that's how Grey Gardens started.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. That is a great story.
Yeah. So yeah, it went back a long way, but I'm here to tell the tale.
That's great. I want to also ask you more about working at Madison Square Gardens.
Oh yeah, that was a trip. Well, I had just come out of film school, right? And so I was being a secretary. I really didn't have any secretarial skills, but I guess they liked me. So, which I realized matters a lot. So yeah, I mean, everything was happening there. I mean, it was the dog shows. It was one rock show after the next. I mean, it was just crazy.
Yeah.
And I have one great story there too. I remember Carlos Santana was playing there one night, and I was doing a lot of still photography at that point, and my boss would let me go backstage and, shoot, which you probably couldn't do today, but I was doing a lot of stills and I was taking pictures backstage, and Carlos Santana came out and said, our conga drummer didn't show up. And I was like, wow. So he said, I need a conga drummer. And I was standing at the line where all these people are waiting to get in. And this kid says to me, I'm a conga drummer. I'm a really good conga drummer. And I brought him back to meet Carlos Santana, and he played the Garden that night.
Oh my gosh.
And actually ended up touring with them. So like I really paid it forward, I mean, it was
for sure. Made that guy's life.
Yeah, it kind of made his life. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's so amazing.
Yeah.
So then how did you evolve? So I know you were worked in promo for a while and then got into more documentaries. Kind of tell me how that career evolved.
Well, I'm going to back up a little from where I left off at the Maisels, because I ended up through another fortuitous event, through another woman who brought me on as an assistant editor to this series at public television in New York called The Men Who Made the Movies. And it was about the lives of Howard Hawks, Raoul Walsh, George Cukor, King Vidor, Vincent Minnelli, and William Wellman. And she brought me on as a young assistant editor. And, I barely knew what I was doing at that point. I mean, I knew something. And we did the film on Alfred Hitchcock, which aired on PBS, and they still run it. And after that, as we went through the series, I worked on the whole series. My mentor left to become a director, and I replaced her as his editor. And it was the producer was Richard Schickel, who was at the time a well-known film critic and film buff, and it was his series. So I became his editor and then his producer, and we, I edited and then ended up producing, probably 10, 12 things for WNET in New York.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Also, one of these lucky fortuitous events.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so it started, that started things. And then I wanted to move to LA because I thought my dream had been really to be in feature film. So I thought, all right, I'll take the move. And I started getting like assistant editor roles on feature films that were from Los Angeles that would come to New York that needed what they called a standby editor. And I was in the union in New York. So I worked on one film that was called The Bell Jar, and they brought me out to LA. And they got me in the union in LA, and that was no easy feat, but they didn't want women in the union out there then, I'll tell you that. So somehow this production manager who had my back, they flew me to LA. I was there for 6 months to finish the film, and he got me into the union. And so I was an East Coast and West Coast union editor. So it was amazing. And then I got a second shot at doing a film called The Long Riders, Walter Hill, where I was a New York editor for a while, and then I went on location with the film. We finished in LA, and I became an associate editor on that film.
How challenging was that for you, where you're saying when they didn't want women as editors at that time?
Well, I kind of had I was young and kind of an upstart, so I was a little feisty about it.
Yeah.
They didn't want that, I mean, it's like they wanted me to start as a apprentice again, to be in the feature film business in Los Angeles. But I'd already been doing music and sound editing on features and other things. So I didn't see the need to go back to being an apprentice, even though, I could have ridden on the coattails of some well-known editor had I decided to do that, but I decided not to do that.
So how did you kind of push against that, or like forge your own way?
Well, I was lucky enough to get these, kind of roles with, in a Walter Hill film, which did very well. And then I made friends, and I, did some sound editing and other kinds of stuff. So, I made my way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Then how did that transition to doing, like, I know you were Emmy nominated, and then you've also won some Promax awards.
Yes, well, that was yeah, it's I think that was, I started working at public television again because I wanted to get out of post-production here, and another fortuitous event happened, and someone knew someone at public television in LA, and they said, call him. And he just happened to be doing a series called Take 5: The Arts, and it was about LA artists, these short documentaries. So he had, the wherewithal to see that I could probably do this, be a director and producer, since I had come out of the editing room. Not a big leap. And he let me produce my first documentary, and that documentary got nominated for an Emmy. So once again, yeah, I think I was headed in the right direction.
Yeah. So you talked about these go ahead.
Fortuitous events, like my life like happens, little miracles like every 7 years when I look at the flow chart of it. Which is, I don't know how it happens, but it does. But there's always some pivot point happening where, like, I don't know what I'm gonna do, and like what's the next path? It's like, what's the next path? What's the next thing? And you try to push something and it doesn't work. You think it's going to be a straight path and it never is. Mm-hmm. So in this case, I got on the, public television train at, in Los Angeles. And so I worked with them for several years on overlapping projects.
How do you, is there a process that you use, to stay open for all those things when you don't know, when you don't know what's next, or, you feel you need to change, but you don't know, like, are you a meditator, or do you just like look for these little signs in the universe to come at you?
I think I'm a say yes girl. And I'm open, I'm pretty open person. So I think it's probably an energy that emanates from me. Like, people have given me opportunities that I had no right to have any of those opportunities in some of them. Like, I can give you a really great example. I'll give you another example if you're interested in this.
Yes, give it to me.
Because it's tangential, but not, so there was one thing, I was after public television. I thought, well, how am I going to really make a living at this? Because we kept losing our funding. Every show we would do, we'd get Emmys and then we'd lose our funding. So it was like, it didn't make any sense at all, right? So I thought, all right, what's next? What's next? And I remember I love doing biographies of people. And I remember interviewing for a job with a production company that didn't have a great reputation. And it was like to do some sort of unauthorized celebrity biography. And I thought, this is really not in my wheelhouse. Like, I'm not an unauthorized celebrity girl. And I remember walking out of this building, and it was in Brentwood, and standing on the corner, and I looked up to the sky. I said, God, please don't make me have to do this job. And I swear to God, 10 minutes later, I got a call from a guy that I worked with who said, "Hey, you want to come start an audiobooks company at our company? We know you love literature. And I think you'd be a good fit for starting this company for us because we're building different companies." They had a sound design company, a rather well-known one. And they said, we're building all these companies. You should start this company for us. And I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, literally, it was like that.
You're like, yes.
So I started up an audiobooks company,
Wow.
using celebrity narrators, and I licensed best-selling books. And I did that for a few years, and it was really fun. While I was sort of doing a little public television here and there, but that was great. So it was another one of those, I think in the back of my head, I always have some sort of thing that says, believe, that, the door will open, you will be led, and
Yeah.
I do a lot of affirmations and that stuff. So I have there's a metaphysical aspect of it at work, I think unconsciously or consciously most of the time, if that makes sense. I mean, people think it's crazy, but
I don't think it's crazy at all. I do a lot of that myself. So I think
or
we're
you,
pretty.
or you get in a really bad job situation, you think, how am I going to get out of this? And somehow something happens. The light comes through the clouds.
Yeah, exactly. That's, I think you just can't let it get you down and just keep open and,
Right.
keeping that positive energy out there for sure. Well, you also, I'm interested in this because I'm a promo editor, producer too.
Yes,
And then
yes,
you were too and won a
I
Promax.
did.
So tell me
Yeah,
about that
so
world.
I did. I was doing promos for CBS at a time when they were doing miniseries and all the top shows we did. It was a really high-end agency that worked for CBS at the time, and I was producing, I don't know, millions. I mean, they were $1 million. So I mean, they were big spots, and I was doing that, and I thought, this isn't really in my wheelhouse either. I'm more of a creative than I was a line producer type. Not that I was. I mean, I was an agency producer, and I wasn't loving that. But I knew I could write this stuff, so I liked a lot of the shows that CBS was doing at the time. So I said, I'm just going to write a bunch of promos and show them to the creative director. And I did. And I took it upon myself to write a bunch of stuff. And I made a meeting with him and I showed him the scripts and he said, hey, these are pretty great. And he started letting me do a bunch of radio commercials, which he loved. And so I, once again, transferred, into more of my wheelhouse than being an on-set time clock producer signing overages every second.
Yeah. I love the story though, because I love how you just took the initiative, and didn't wait for something wanted to ask you to do that. You just saw a chance and you pounced on it.
Right. Yeah. No, I said, I can write this stuff.
Yeah.
And then I worked for them for a while, and then I worked directly for CBS for a while after that. So,
Yeah. Then tell me about making your way to now doing what you're doing now.
yeah.
And finding
So
your
I was
passion.
doing a lot of stuff, I was doing a lot of stuff for the studios too. I went into my trailer period where I was doing writing and producing trailers, being creative director. So I was doing that, and I was working at a company, an agency that had DVD in it. So I ended up starting the DVD division of this company. So we were doing documentaries that went on DVDs. So that was getting back into documentaries again, which was great actually. So Disney and Warner's were my clients mostly, and we did, I was doing The West Wing, I did the OC at the time, I did John Lennon Imagine Anniversary DVD, and we did documentaries for all of them. And it was actually a lot of fun because it was kind of under the radar material. So you could come up with really crazy ideas and they just say yes. And I was like, what? And so it was kind of really fun,
Yeah.
and they were making a lot of that stuff back then. And then that sort of ended because they were like, home entertainment was starting to go away in the physical sense, and everything was starting to be, VOD and that kind of digital transformation that they were doing. So they said, we don't need to make this stuff, so that business kind of, once again, you see a business rise and then it peaks and then it starts to fall. So the resources weren't there. So then Warner Brothers hired me to consult. So I'd go because I pretty much worked in every department, so they hired me on the DVD side, on the creative advertising side, on the DVD menu side. And they were really great because I kind of knew everyone. I was working with the same agency. So, so I was not on staff, but I worked enough to make it, work.
Yeah.
Then I came to another crossroads and I thought, what's next, And I got a call once again. I got a call, weirdly enough. I knew a psychiatrist who was treating an elderly relative of mine. And I used to have to talk to him and tell him what drug she was on, blah, 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 what her wellness thing was. And he said, they're trying to do a documentary on this guy who was my mentor. And I think you would be a good fit for this. Why don't you read his book? And I read the book and I flipped out. I was like, oh my God, this is a movie, such a movie. But they didn't have the financing to do a movie, but they did have the financing to do a documentary. So he said, all right, go talk to the guy. And I went to talk to Dr. Bale, who is the subject of my documentary. And I pitched him what I saw in it. And they were vetting a lot of pitches and they liked my, the way I saw it. And I wrote up a proposal and basically the rest is history. So, it wasn't that easy, but
Yeah, let's talk about some of the hard parts too. Yeah, I read that this took you like 3 years to get from start to finish, and that you also started your own company out of this instead of working for somebody else.
Well, this is another good thing that I did, because when this film started, there were other people that could have been involved in it, but I didn't really know them and I didn't know what that landscape would be like. So I opted not to get involved with these other partnerships, and I decided to start my own company because I had all the wherewithal. I knew everything. I knew who to hire and I could easily put a team together. So I started my own company and they funded my company. So the investors funded my company. So that's how it started. And, I brought on a great line producer, Edith Becker, who's wonderful. And the credit reads like public television credits. There's a million people involved in this thing. So, but we started in, I think, 2016, and the idea of taking Dr. Bale back to Germany to the place he was incarcerated was not in the original budget, but I thought it would be a very good thing to do if he was open to it. And he was open to it. And I think it changed the course of the film for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, those are wonderful moments.
A little ahead of myself, but
yeah, tell everybody what the film is about.
Yeah, the film's about really an exceptional human being named Dr. Bernard Bale, who is a psychoanalyst who, in World War II, who's a Jewish lead radar navigator in Europe. He went on 25 missions. He was shot down on the 25th mission, which is kind of an omen, and captured by the Nazis. And as he was recovering in a German hospital, he fell in love with his German nurse in a clandestine affair that happened between love letters, which I had. So his affair with this woman changed the course of his life and changed his mind. He wanted to become a healer. He wanted to put an end to war. And he saw in her what he called the power of the divine feminine. And that made him go on to become a doctor and psychoanalyst who ended up pioneering early theory about transgenerational transmission of trauma that happens in utero. The idea that mental health anguish can come from past generations and kind of epigenetically genes can be turned on and off. And I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, but that was his early idea. And he was an early advocate for women because he saw the oppression of women over time and that how women are bearing the next generation. and they need to be protected. They need to be a part of society, and that we will never have peace in the world until women have a place at the table. So his mission in life was to put an end to war, because he had been through such terrible things and witnessed such terrible things in the war. And, it seemed like a simple idea. And in a way it is. It's like the idea of, if each person can end the wars inside themselves, that's going to ripple out. And this is not just the United States, this is global. He feels that everyone, to a greater or lesser degree, has some sort of unconscious imprint that's holding them back from being, having the full love that they can in their life. And our tagline is love conquers all. And it certainly happened for him in his hospital room, that he didn't know when this nurse, Irmgard, walked in his room that night in the dark, whether she was coming to give him a lethal injection.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't know. He was a frightened war imprisoned, prisoner. So when she came in and offered him a glass of wine, and that started their relationship, a whole scope of life opened up before him that he never could have imagined. Never. And one of the things he says in the film, which is so poignant and so true, is that at one point he says, in a way he lived under a lucky star by being saved by this woman. But he says, a lot of people helped me in my life, even the enemy. Yeah. And it's a very chilling moment, because it's really true, and that can happen. And his vision for the future, which is also very poignant. His wish for the future was that someday there will be an invading armies bringing gifts, and it's just still gives me the chills, no torture, no maiming, no bad memories, and it's a vision for the future that he really spent his life devoted to, really. The easing of mental anguish. And so anyway, that's what the film's
Yeah. Talk about, and some of the moments you were saying it was a big decision for you to get the budget to take him back to Germany. And I know there's some key moments that also happened, like when you heard the chimes and those types
once
of things.
again, it's these serendipitous moments, these fortuitous things that happen, which he was very much a believer in. He was very metaphysical. And when we were in Germany, I took him back to the room he was incarcerated in. And he was a little town called Göppingen, Germany, about a half hour outside of Stuttgart. And we took the train there from Stuttgart. And when we got there, he hadn't been there in 71 years. And we had scouted beforehand. I had a team in Germany scouting what room. We could only get a description of what room he was in that school, which was then a hospital. And we had picked out one room that we thought was it. But when he got there and walked up the steps, he's like 95 years old at this point. He walks up all these steps and like kind of like a sniffing dog, he sniffed his way right to the room. And it was not the room we thought it was. But when he opened the door, he's like, this is the room. And we were just like, oh my God, And that was like 71 years. And it was also both cathartic and traumatic for him, because he realized that he had been responsible for killing people. And, the German people were just so amazingly generous and compassionate and helpful to us that his relationships there, our interactions were really quite cathartic. But back to the serendipitous, I haven't forgotten about the serendipitous moment. I just derailed for a second, but
yeah, that's good. These stories are great. So it's fun.
Yeah, so we were outside, and he said, "Oh, we were standing on the steps outside," and he said he used to hear her play the flute outside. And as he's talking about Irmgard, saying, "I remember she did this. I remember she did that. I'm sure she's here in spirit. She's here in spirit." And at that moment, the church bells went off, the chimes went off, and we were like, oh my God, and he says, she's here. And it was just one of those moments. And there are several moments that happen like that, but Yeah.
Yeah, I love things
Long.
like that, you know, because I
Yeah.
do feel like we have those connections with people, you know, that never go away. How was it
Right.
for you? You said you have all the love letters. What was it like reading all of
Yeah.
those?
We had all the love letters from her to him, but not from him to her. And she wrote in English,
Hmm.
and she could speak English. But she wrote in English, and so I had all of those letters. It was beautiful. And then I use animation graphics to, as you can see in the film, to
Mhm.
portray those letters. Yeah.
I want to get your
Beautiful.
thoughts. It's one of the moments he says there's a picture book that's left on his hotel when he goes back to search
Right.
for her, and he's convinced
Right.
it's her. Do you think yes it is? And then if so, why do you think she didn't see him?
Well, this is the big question. People want to know, why didn't he see her again? And I have my own theories about that. And, at the end of the war, when he left her, he never got her name or address. And I thought that was really interesting, because I thought, in a way, he was fulfilling his own imprint of not being able to have the love he needed either, which was from his mother, who was forced into an arranged marriage and was always yearning for this love that she couldn't have. So I think unconsciously that may have been going on. Now, this is my theory. And I think the arc of the film really is him coming back to love, this pure love that he talks about. And now I'm forgetting the question he asked me, which was about,
But
um,
do you think it was her that left it? And then if
yeah.
so, like, why didn't
So
she?
yeah, because he went back to Germany on a conference in 1985, and before he got there, he put, all this, he put stuff in the newspapers to try to find her, and magazines, and no one responded. And he thinks it was because they portrayed him as some sort of Hollywood shrink. And it was too much closer to the war than it wasn't at that time. And no one kind of wanted to be associated with it. So that's what he thought. Now, he wasn't sure if she was alive or not, but that was definitely, someone, whether it was her or not, brought this book of drawings to his hotel room. So they knew he was in town.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'd like
Yeah.
to think it was her, but there's no
Yeah.
one to know for sure.
Yeah. And somebody clearly wanted him to have it, if they sniffed out where he was staying and all of that. So
Right, exactly.
oh, it's so interesting. Such a great story. And then he finds love at the end.
He does.
To
He
give it
finds
away.
love. He's 95, and I think she was, I don't know, 62 or something at the time. Cynthia, his widow, and yeah, they found this kind of true love
Yeah.
at the end of his life, and it was lovely,
Yeah. Well, just such a great story, and you did such a great job of doing the storytelling, and you're just like sucked
Thank
in. I mean, from
you.
the early on, the scenes of, is taking us back through being, the radar, in his Navy days and the stories, and and the story when he talks about saving the life of his
Yes.
captain, or
Oh,
yeah.
oh my God, that was such an incredible story, and that's a true story. I mean, you can find that online, that story. It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So crazy. And that's why I say he was kind of born under a lucky star in a way. Not that he didn't struggle, but people did come to his aid, and he did believe in, a kind of spirituality, and what he later came to, call God for himself. He did believe in God.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, he
Yeah.
was pretty spiritual
Yeah.
guy. He believed in the angels, the angels were coming. So
Mhm.
even the first time when he was in the ice storm and
Yeah.
lost his way, he had an intuition which way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Could have been the wrong thing, who knows? But he let himself be guided.
Yeah.
Definitely. So he
Yeah.
always stayed to his true north, as he would put it. And that's a good lesson for everyone, I think.
Yeah, definitely. What was this process like for you creating this film?
It was it was one of the best things I've ever done in terms of, creatively, certainly, because I was able to combine both cinema verite styles, recreations, interviews. So I got the best of all got it all in there. Great motion graphics and animation, I have to say. I mean, Kuamara, animation guy, amazing. Who I worked with in promo, by the way.
Oh, wow.
He was genius. Yeah. And we reconnected and I said, you got to do this film. And he did. It's just really, really great.
Those promo
So,
connections stay strong.
so on a creative side, it was just 100%. And I had investors who were just, do what you need to do, we're going to support you, and they knew how to support artists. So I pretty much had free reign on that, who to hire and how to creatively do everything was really in my ballpark. And then the great thing was I got to work with my daughter on it, which was interesting because the mother-daughter connection all throughout the film.
Yes, definitely.
And she was the story editor and researcher, and she had come from the legal field, so she was forensic. She could find anything, and she was fantastic visually and on a directorial side even. So that was interesting because as a single mom, I spent more time with her when I was on this film than I turned to her and said, I don't think we've ever spent this much time together, because I was always working, and so to get the opportunity to work with her and see her blossom as well, it was just beyond great, really beyond great.
Yeah, what a wonderful experience to have together. Did you talk about whether you think, the philosophies you guys see?
Totally. We totally talk about it. Yeah. And I absolutely think it's, there's a lot of truth to it. I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist, psychoanalyst, psychologist, so I can't speak to the theory of whether true, not true. I can't speak to that. What I can speak to is explaining it well. I think that was my job, to explain it and highlight it. And that's actually what I love to do. I like to forensically get into process, whether it's a complex theory like this or space station. I worked with the ISS astronauts, breaking down their process or the process of making a film or whatever it is. I just love being able to do that in a creative way, and I think that was accomplished in this film.
What did you get to do with the astronauts?
It was for the International Space Station DVD that Warner Brothers did. It was an IMAX film DVD, and I worked with a lot of the astronauts.
Interesting.
It was pretty fascinating. Yeah.
Back to the film, were there any challenges that you faced or moments you had to push through?
Well, there's always that, but I've gotten so good at problem solving, I don't actually think of it as problems. But there was one fun thing that happened, only because I can look at it as fun things now. I mean, I pretty much don't panic on anything, but we had to build a wall. We had to build the hospital wall when we were doing the recreations. We had to build the wall and the doorways, and we did. And we had a sound stage, so they built it off the sound stage. But when they went to load the wall in, it didn't fit in the door because we had rented a sound stage that didn't have the giant doors like at the studio, and it wouldn't fit in the door. So we had to cut the wall and put a molding over it, but you can't really see it because it's dark enough, So that was fun. Oh, thank God we knew that a few days ahead.
How do you manage? You say you stay calm. How do you manage to do that? Because I know productions can get crazy, and it can be
managed to do. What did you say? Managed to do what?
To stay calm. You said you don't really let challenges phase you.
Yeah, well, you have to have the best team around you, and so I did. And so I didn't really. The logistics team, we would meet for sure, but I didn't have to get totally involved in all of it. I mean, at least the planning of it. We'd pick a date, and then the logistics, a date where we would shoot it, blah blah blah. If I needed a backdrop, I would I would do the backdrop and all that stuff and, figure out what the setup was going to be or storyboard something. But aside from that, I had a great logistics team.
Yeah, it's great.
Really great.
Where can everybody watch this film?
Oh, goody. This is where it gets good. The film is on Apple TV Plus, iTunes, Amazon Prime, Vudu, and others.
Mhm.
It's out there. It's out there for the taking.
Yeah. It's wonderful. I just watched it on Amazon today and it's just,
Oh,
yeah,
thank you.
yeah, it's
Thank
great.
you.
Great
I
job.
hope you left a review.
Oh, that I haven't done yet, but I can do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Well, let's talk a little bit for those listening who may have, aspirations of following in your footsteps, have a passion for documentaries or filmmaking. Any tips or pieces of advice of things you've learned through your career of, how to find success or what kind of works?
This is going to sound cliched, but follow what you're interested in. And I have to say, today it's different than when I was coming up, because when I was coming up, the barrier to entry was huge. Like if you weren't like a trust fund kid whose father or mother gave you, a 16 millimeter expensive camera and film, you didn't get to do it. But now there's no excuse for you not making a movie on your iPhone just to test your skills and your passion. So just do it. I mean, that's the cliche. Just do it. If you think you can do it, do it.
Mhm. Mm. What about how have you seen the industry kind of evolve for women over the years as well?
Um, I mean, it's evolved. It's certainly evolving now. And so there's more opportunities. Certainly when I was coming up in the feature film world, forget it. It was hard enough to be even an editor there. And I mean, I was once told they wouldn't hire me because women get their periods. They actually said that to me.
Oh,
Well, we don't hire women because they get their periods and they're moody. Like you're not,
yeah,
but I wouldn't want to work for them anyway, right?
right.
And it was a commercial editing house in New York, it was like, forget it. But so I think the opportunities are definitely there now, but you have to go out and, kind of grab it.
Mhm. What's your process for on this one? You wrote, produced, and directed all. Like, how do you kind of go through the process of wearing all those hats?
It's an interesting question, because it was the first time that I had to, where I was handling investors as well, who were just
Mhm.
wonderful human beings. And so I was handling all the money. I was really the only one that had check signing privileges. And I handled that. And the wearing the three hats is really, it's something I always did in the documentary realm. So it wasn't something that was new to me, because you just kind of got to guerrilla it.
Mhm.
So I can't say, I see the process for me is really starting with something creative. What is the image? It's usually an image of some sort with an emotion attached to it that's going to drive the project. And I was like, what is the emotional through line of this film? And it was, let's say love conquers all, or just keep that the love emotion going through the film.
Mhm.
And in every act of the film, I think it does do that. But the main image of the film that carried me forward was the image of the nurse coming into the dark room with the flashlight that kind of blows out. Because when I first read the book, that was the thing that struck me. I thought, okay, here it is. This is the dark and light of it.
Mhm.
And this is what needs to happen. Dark and light, like music all through the film, and I think it fulfills on that.
Yeah, it definitely does.
Hmm.
How hard is it, or what do you do to get financing for projects?
Well, I'm a kind of a bad person to ask for that, because this is the first time where I've had to get financing, and it was a relatively easy path. So other times, you have to go out and get grants, and everyone else is trying to get the same grant, and it's not that much money,
Mhm.
or if you can sell, I'd say today, if you can sell a docuseries with some big talent attached, you can make some money. Otherwise, it's going to be tough.
To do. Okay.
It's tough. Not impossible, but You got to have the fortitude to want to do it.
Yeah. Any other lessons? I know the saying, yes, we got any other things that you think they.
Yeah, my big one is like nobody knows anything. So feel free to take advice. And I say do take advice or listen to advice. But at the end of the day, no one is you, and no one can tell you when the next hit's coming. No one can tell you what's going to go viral. And none of that shit matters. What matters is that you get to fulfill something that you had a vision of. And if it fails, it fails, but at least you had your try at it. So, people, but it's not gospel because nobody knows anything. I know that sounds awful, but
no, I love it because it's like definitely sticking true to your uniqueness, your vision, what's going to separate you or your thoughts someone else.
There is no way one could have predicted, or I could have predicted, that this film would come my way. I mean, it's never, at least for me, it's never been a straight line. It's not a straight path. And so once again, it's that be open. And as Ted Lasso says, believe.
Yep.
You just got to have something going on in the back of you, because there are tough times.
Yeah.
I won't lie there. I mean, there's been challenges, been a lot of abundance, and then sometimes not.
Yeah. And how much do you love Ted Lasso?
I can't even tell you. I've seen it both seasons 3 times.
I love it.
Don't even get me started on Succession. That's a whole other thing.
Oh, that's what yeah. I'm behind on that one, but
obsessed. Also seen that 3 times. Every episode.
I love it. I knew friends kept telling me to watch Ted Lasso, so I was a little late to the party. And then once I did, I was like, "Oh my gosh!" I'm like, "I love this."
Aren't you just in love with him? I mean,
yes,
it's just the best.
So it just makes me happy. The episodes go too quickly. Love it.
I know. I hate it when it's over, and I'm such an Anglophile anyway. And it's like, oh my God, this is so my wheelhouse.
Yeah. I love it. All right. Well, what's next for you?
Well, it's hard to say, but I may be doing a film on PTSD treatments. Hopefully that'll be a series. We're talking about developing And Now Love as a feature film. And I've got a book that I optioned with a partner that's about a young Kenyan girl's struggle to overcome patriarchal society, basically, and she does. So those things are on the docket at the moment, and who knows? I'm open.
Yeah, you're gonna get another call or something from
I
the
don't
universe.
know.
Yeah, we'll see. I can't wait to see what's next. We'll tell everybody again where they can find the movie and then where they can follow you on social media or follow your career.
Well, you can find And Now Love. You can find it on Amazon, Apple TV Plus, iTunes, Vudu, and there are other platforms out there as well, but it's readily available. So feel free to, if you do it on Amazon, feel free to write a review. I'm at, if you want to try to get me, I'm not a big social media person, but you can try me on LinkedIn. Jill Demby, linkedin.com/Jill Demby Guest. That's DEM like Mary, BY, Guest, GUEST. And I frequent Instagram on occasion, so you could DM me there if you're interested, at Jill Demby Guest.
Well, Jill, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, you're so wonderful. I love hearing all your journey and about the film, and best of luck with the film. You've already won some awards with the film, haven't you?
We have. We won 3 film festival awards, 2 for best documentary and 1 for best documentary director. So 3 out of 3, not bad.
Not bad at all. Congratulations.
So so let me know about your promo situation. Feel free to email me.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Okay, take care. Thank you.
All right, that's a wrap for today, guys. Thanks again for listening. You can follow us everywhere at Tom Girl TV, and we'll see you here again next week. Bye-bye.